is a bright and warm London evening in early July 1961, and Soho, the capital sleazy square mile, is opening for its tawdry business. A middle-aged man pauses at a tobacconist's showcase and casts an eye over a selection of cards advertising call girl services. He decides upon May, a 20-year-old brunette, notes her telephone number and calls her from a payphone. May answers his call. She tells him her address, 27 Brunton Street, Soho, and to come right up.
Toy Trap. Written by Bill Strutton, produced by Leonard White, and directed by Don Lever.
Bustles, a nearby department store, has closed for the night, and salesgirls Bunty Seaton and May Merton visit the powder room on their way out. They are to dine out together, but May apologizes. She will be badly delayed. Alice, another colleague, enters. Alice envies May, who has given her notice at the store and has her own flat, while Alice and Bunty board at Bustle's squalid hostel. As May removes her blouse, a series of bad bruises to her arms and ribs become apparent. She refuses to discuss how she got them and leaves. Alice says to Bunty that May must have boyfriend problems. The conversation turns to Bunty's night out with Dr. Keel, a family friend who had been a locum at her father's country practice. Her father has asked Keel to keep an eye on Bunty while she is in London. Later that evening, Keel arrives belatedly at the hostel. He asks the manageress, Mrs. McCabe, to let Bunty know he has arrived. He goes to the lounge area to wait and flicks through a magazine to pass the time. Bunty arrives after a few minutes and Keel greets her fondly. He urges they go straight to the restaurant, but Bunty is worried about her friend May. She has not turned up as arranged and seems to have been beaten up by her boyfriend. Keel agrees they should call on her. The address that Bunty gives him is near the restaurant they plan to dine at. Bunty and Keel find no sign of May at her flat. She seems to have left in a hurry. The place is in a mess and chests of drawers have been emptied and left open. The telephone rings. Keel answers it. A female voice mistakes him for a man called Lenny and then asks for May. When Keel explains that he is not this Lenny, the line goes dead. Keel finds some photos depicting May and another girl in glamour poses. Bunty's friend is in deep trouble. However, Keel and Bunty are oblivious to the presence of a shady figure with crutches who is listening to their conversation from the stairs. Later that night, Bunty goes with Keel to his rooms to meet with Steed, who Keel has contacted. Keel cooks a meal for his guests and brings Steed up to speed regarding May's predicament. It is clear the girl is on the game, and he fears that if they don't investigate, Bunty may get drawn into the same sordid lifestyle. Steed is concerned, but his main worry is that Keel is no great cook. Keel deflects the light-hearted criticism, and Bunty offers to lay out the cutlery in the dining room. Once she has left the kitchenette, Steed suggests that he and Keel should find out who took the photographs. "There are dozens of these artistic creeps around Soho with a flood lamp, a bed and an attic," Steed comments. Bunty rushes back into the kitchen. She has smelt burning. Steed's reservations about Keel's cooking appear to have been well placed. Meanwhile, in a nearby apartment, Freddie, the man on crutches, delivers his report about Keel and Bunty to a strange-looking, heavily made-up woman called Maya. She says that Keel will be dealt with if he proves a problem to them. In the meantime, Freddie is to move another call girl into May's empty flat. It wouldn't do to let the business falter. The next morning, Keel and Steed visit a Soho photographer. Steed casts an eye over some glamour photos and asks the proprietor about a girl in one of them. He has recognized her as the other girl photographed with May. The man says that her name is Chrissy, one of his regulars. Steed explains that his friend is up from the country and will be interested in meeting her. Keel feigns a gauche innocence, and the photographer telephones Chrissy. In the girl's flat, the telephone rings. Her Siamese cat meows for her mistress to stop the noise. However, her owner is unable to answer, for Chrissy lies on the floor, very, very dead. Later, Steed decides to visit Bunty in the toy department at Bustles. He asks her if she ever heard May mention a girl called Chrissy. Bunty thinks not. Steed reveals that this Chrissy has been killed, probably because she wanted to get out of a call girl racket. Steed asks Bunty to introduce him to the department manager so he can get some information on May. Bunty announces him as Dr. Steed, checking up on a patient. Henry Burge is protective of staff privacy, but as Steed is a doctor, he divulges the address of May's parents. Steed also shows Burge a photograph of Chrissy. He recognises her as Christine Sandia, a former salesgirl at the store. Steed thanks Burge for his help. Steed confides to Bunty that he knows where May's parents live. She doubts this will help as May ran away from home, so Steed tries a different tack. He asks Bunty's colleague Alice if she knows May's friend Lenny, the person Chrissy had mistaken Keel for in her call to May's flat. Alice points out Lenny Taylor. He used to see a lot of May, she says. Steed also learns that Alice knew Chrissy and was aware of the lifestyle she had fallen into. Chrissy came from the north, looking for the high life. A pimp serenaded her, got her a club job, paid her first month's rent, and she was caught in a trap. Steed thanks Alice and treats himself to a Czechoslovakian teddy bear. After Steed departs, Lenny Taylor makes a telephone call and reports that a stranger at the store is asking too many questions. Later, Steed meets Keel at the surgery. He reveals that as soon as he claimed to be a doctor, people fell over themselves to help him. "Can't think why I never thought of it before," muses Steed. "It's a real open sesame. Dr. Steed. It's an excellent idea." Keel suggests Steed doesn't make a habit of impersonating doctors. Steed changes the subject. He has learned that his department are trying to crack a Soho vice ring and has decided to make it his business too. He wants the big fish behind it all. He suggests that they could get Bunty to infiltrate the organisation. Keel is horrified at the very thought and admonishes his friend. Steed backs down and leaves Keel with a present, the teddy bear he had purchased earlier. That evening, Keel visits Bunty, who is frustrated that despite all efforts, May has not been located. Keel sympathises. "It's not so easy," he remarks. "This is a very big city. Once you get mixed up in the senior side of it, it's quite easy to get lost." Steed telephones Keel at the hostel. He has been checking up on Lenny Taylor and has found out he has been in and out of clink for years. In addition to his day job at the store, Taylor moonlights as a heavy at a Soho club. He lives in Brixton, and Steed wants to look over the property with Keel, who makes his apologies to Bunty and sets off. After arriving in Brixton, Steed and Keel break into Taylor's flat once he has left for his night job. Inside, Steed notices smoke rising from an ashtray. He draws his gun and makes a dash across the room. He grabs the curtains, pulling them open to reveal the cowering form of May Merton. She is quite terrified and screams to be left alone. May recovers a little. Despite Keel and Steed's claims of being there to help, May doesn't trust them and believes they are from the police. When her friend Bunty Seaton arrives, May's control crumbles and she fights an impulse to sob. She has been hiding out with Lenny Taylor because she was in a real spot. She had been charmed into a life of prostitution and degradation. When she tried to get out, they beat her mercilessly. Keel asks her if she'd like to tell them about the people who ensnared her and treated her so badly. Steed wants to know who gives the orders. Meanwhile, Maya tells Johnny she has discovered that Lenny Taylor has been giving refuge to May. Johnny is ordered to find May, and Maya will have Freddie deal with Lenny. Late that night, Taylor's dead body is dumped from a car into a roadside. At the store the next morning, Bunty declares loudly to Alice that she is fed up with Mrs. McCabe's restrictions and plans to resign from Bustles and leave the hostel. She wants a much better paid job. Bunty cannot be convinced otherwise, so Alice returns to her counter. Johnny, who has heard Bunty's outburst, picks up a doll and goes to pay for it. When Bunty refuses a sizable tip, he offers to take her for a drink instead. She accepts. He will pick her up in his sports car at 6 o'clock. Steed has heard the whole exchange and tells Bunty that she was marvellous, but she must not tell Keel about their little plot. There is no reason to worry. Steed will be at close hand all the time. Bunty mentions in passing that Lenny Taylor has not turned up for work. "We found him last night." "He won't be coming back," says Steed with an air of finality. That evening, Johnny's car is parked up off-road. Bunty leans back in the passenger seat, hanging on Johnny's every word. He offers to set her up in a nice part of town with plenty of money. Bunty is cautious. She says she is worried that what happened to Chrissy, May and Lenny could also befall her. Before she commits, she wants to meet the others involved. Johnny plays it cool. The girl knows more than she should. He starts the engine and suggests they go for a meal. Later, Johnny calls Maya from a restaurant. Maya agrees. It is interesting how Bunty connects Chrissy and Lenny to them. Clearly the girl is working on someone's behalf, but whose? Maya tells Johnny to bring the girl in for a meeting. The next evening, Bunty is asked by Henry Burge to stay behind after hours to help Alice, Peggy and himself stocktake. She should be meeting Steve, but feels obliged to agree. Burge has Bunty work alone in his office, checking their Czechoslovakian stock against a master list. When Alice and Peggy finish their work, Burge offers to show his gratitude in the saloon bar of the Coach and Horses, but the girls, wary of Burge's wandering hands, make a swift departure and neglect to tell Bunty that they are leaving. A little later, Keel telephones the hostel to speak to Bunty. Mrs. McCabe explains that Bunty has not returned home. She takes Keel's details and will pass on a message when Bunty returns. Meanwhile, Henry Burge leaves for a brief time to pick up some sandwiches from the pub. Bunty continues her work, but suddenly realizes that she is alone. Alice and Peggy are gone. Nervous, she tries to call Keel from the department telephone, but someone cuts the connection at the store switchboard. Maya's thug, Freddy, is on the prowl, his crutches clattering on the shop floor. Bunty hears his approach and tiptoes to the office. She conceals herself behind the door, just before Freddy smashes it open. Her heart leaps, but she is not detected, and Freddy moves off noisily. Meanwhile, Keel meets Alice at the hostel. He fears that Mrs. McCabe has not delivered his messages to Bunty. Alice says that Bunty is most likely at the store with the slimy Henry Burge, and that he has a history of crushes on young girls at Bustles. Keel is very concerned and dashes off to the store. Alice rues her luck. Every time a good-looking man comes into her life, he runs off. At Bustles, Freddy lunges at Bunty just as Henry Burge returns from the pub. Bunty thinks she has been saved, but Burge's manner is odd, even for him. He grabs her roughly and threatens to take her to meet the woman who runs the vice ring. Steed suddenly emerges from a toy wigwam. 3 fellow agents also break cover. Burge is subdued and Bunty is freed. Maya and Johnny enter unaware of Steed's arrival. Steed motions for them to join Burge and Freddy and has his agents cover the 4 criminals. Keel enters and Bunty suddenly cries out. She is sure that under all the makeup and the dark glasses, Maya is Mrs. McCabe from the hostel. Steed has one of his colleagues restrain the woman, and she loses her dark glasses and blonde wig as she struggles with the agent. Bunty was right. Maya is revealed to be the manageress of Bustle's hostel. Mrs. McCabe, the tired-faced woman, has been running the whole operation. Steed has his men round up and arrest the criminals. They will all be facing the judge. Steed is delighted it has all gone so well and plays on a child's swing by way of celebration, but he has his own inquisition to face. Keel is furious that his friend went against his express wishes and involved Bunty. Steed contests that she is perfectly fine. She plans to go home to her parents and has persuaded May to spend an extended holiday there too. Keel is still furious at Steed and tells him as much. Steed loses his temper. "Steady on, old boy. People don't talk to me like that," he hisses. "Well, here's one that does," spits Keel, grabbing Steed. "If you ever go behind my back again, I'll take you apart. That girl was in my trust. From now on, you're on your own." Steed attempts to justify his actions. It had been a question of expediency. The time it would have taken to set up another contact would have risked the entrapment and possible murder of more innocent girls. Keel is having none of it. He is disgusted with the way Steed uses people and exposes them to dangers they should be protected from. "There was no other way," says Steed firmly. "Then you just find another way," replies Keel bitterly.